This week, the state we're in paid a visit to the governor's mansion and talked to Governor Edwards about some of this session's issues. Governor Edwards, the legislature has gone home to take a break, to talk to constituents. What's your reaction in this first part of the session? Were you surprised at the number of bills that have been introduced?
No, I think it's traditional that somewhere in excess of 2,000 bills are filed, and I think 2,400 have been filed. And, I'm not surprised at all.
Do you see many legislators still coming to you? You more or less in your opening remarks said it's going to be up to you to take the initiative in some areas. Do you still find legislators coming to you and asking you to intervene, help them with this bill, help them with that?
To some extent, but that's decreasing substantially as the legislature becomes more independent and as individual legislators rise to their own initiatives and capacities and have been able to, after 2 years with this particular legislature, now going into the third, learn the demeanors and thinking and philosophies of their fellow legislators. And I think it's shaping up very well.
One of your proposals in your opening speech to the session concerned the whole problem of mass transit and money for parish roads. The other day in the Appropriations Committee, it was Mr. Fisher indicated that the problems in New Orleans might not be solved just with this amount of money. Are you thinking of upping the amount of money for mass transit?
That's a long-range prediction. That's a possibility. But there are a number of alternatives available to us, and we believe that these suggested funds that we will be making this year will clearly resolve the problem during that fiscal year. What will happen after that, of course, we'll have to face as it comes.
Let me run down a few of these other issues. How do you feel about the change in the head and master law, equal management for women?
I think if I were to make the decision, and I will not, I would leave it as it is. I think it's worked very well. There's one thing that those who propose the change fail to come to grips with is a very simple fact that there's nothing to prevent equal management now under the law, if that's what the wife wants. But at the same time, it makes it possible for a husband to handle the business of the community without the wife having to troop down to the lawyer's office and sign papers, to go to the courthouse to file papers, to go to board meetings and to do things which many wives and mothers do not want to do. Point I make is that nothing in the law now prohibits that arrangement if that's what the husband and wife want to do. And I really believe it could be best just left alone. However, I'm not all that ginned up about it one way or the other. I think that to pass a law which would require a wife and every wife and all wives, regardless of their age or temperaments or desires, to participate in signing all documents and doing all things regarding the family business or the family properties, might end up causing more problems than it would solve.
You're still for the ERA?
If I win the legislature, I would vote for passage of ERA.
And you predict it will fail again?
I predict that it will fail again.
All right. Let's move on to one other thing. The Coastal Zone Management Bill, a lot of sort of a brouhaha has developed over who's handling it, who's going to have it. How did that all come about, and how is it going to be resolved? Is Mr. Fisher still going to handle it through the legislature?
At this point, I do not know. Coastal zone management is a very important new, and I emphasize new, concept. I want to make certain that local government and local people on the coast areas maintain the maximum control allowable under federal regulations. But at the same time, I must see about getting legislation passed which will bring us into compliance with federal regulations to make certain that we do not lose the control of the coastal areas to the federal government. And that is what would happen if we did not address the problem. Whether or not Mr. Fisher's department handles it or Mr. Hull's is really immaterial to me, as long as Fisher, who has been largely responsible for bringing this baby into being and nurturing and changing its diapers and wet nursing it for the past year and a half, as long as he is kept on board to make sure that there's a smooth transaction and we do not lose much of the good, valuable ground which he, through his efforts in Washington, have acquired for us in the past year and a half. I believe that ultimately it could go to natural resources, not that that's indispensable or really important, but if that's the legislative will, so be it.
Last week you came out in support of first use tax. Do you see any problems in passing it through the legislature?
There are always problems in passing legislation before 144 independent-minded men and women, such as this legislature. However, I cannot conceive that a vast majority of the legislature would not support a bill which would provide for Louisiana residents some measure of compensation for the use of our facilities, police and other support services as gas is transported into, processed by, and then removed from the state and into other state areas. Furthermore, we need very badly to generate some monies to prevent erosion of the coastal areas, and a part of that would go into that area to prevent the Gulf coastline from eroding further inland and losing some of the 3-mile outward limits that we now have. And more important, I believe, or certainly just as important, is to provide a sinking fund to retire the state's debt so that our children and their children will not be burdened with a large debt that was imposed upon them in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
First use taxes, you've considered it before. Another idea that's even more controversial than that is abrogating natural gas contracts. Do you envision that being a possibility?
At this moment, no.
We also asked the governor if his feud with the Supreme Court had been resolved and if he had talked to Chief Justice Joe Sanders following Sanders' address to the legislature.
I have not talked to him at all, either before the controversy or since. And it's one of the unfair things about some of the media in the whole controversy by suggesting that in some way I had threatened him or sent word to him some kind of unholy message, which just is not so. I don't know of any reason why he should have anything to say about me. He is a member of the Supreme Court. I'm the governor of a state. We're in different departments. I have a right to criticize his decisions as he has a right to criticize mine, and I'm sure if he felt so disposed, he would have criticized some of mine.
A lot of people have made reference to the fact that you seem to be going off the deep end in your criticism of the press. It seems to be occupying a lot of your time or your public conversations. How do you react
I do not
to that?
agree with your premise that a lot of people think that. That is not
A
what
lot of people in the press, of course.
A lot of people in the press, of course. Most people in the press think you're going on the deep end if you ever dare suggest that they are human and subject to error. But I don't mind suggesting that the press is subject to error because it is subject to error.